The humiliation started 3 hours earlier, when I arrived at Meridian for what I thought would be a quiet birthday dinner alone. I'd specifically chosen my birthday to come here. Not because I needed anyone to celebrate with me, but because this was the one day of the year I allowed myself to enjoy the fruits of 12 years of silent, strategic work. 12 years of building something my family knew nothing about. 12 years of being called the disappointment, while I constructed an empire they couldn't begin to comprehend. Meridian wasn't just any restaurant. It was the restaurant in our city. 3 Michelin stars. 6-month waiting list. The kind of place where CEOs proposed business deals and celebrities hid in private dining rooms. The kind of place my mother had tried to get reservations at for 5 years and failed every single time. I was escorted to table 7, the corner table with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. My usual table. Miss Chen, the sommelier, greeted me warmly. We have the 2015 Château Margaux you requested. Shall I decant it now? Please, Marcus. Thank you. I just settled in when I heard the voice that had criticized every choice I'd made for 28 years. Absolutely not. We've been on the waiting list for 3 years. My mother's voice carried across the restaurant like a fire alarm. I didn't turn around. I knew that tone. I'd heard it my entire life. Ma'am, I apologize, but we're completely booked tonight. Do you know who my husband is? Richard Chen. Chen Properties. We demand a table. I closed my eyes. Of course they were here. Of course, on the one night I'd given myself permission to exist in my own world, they would invade it. The hostess, to her credit, remained professional. Sir, ma'am, I truly apologize. We have no availability tonight. I'd be happy to add you to our priority list for next month. Next month? This is ridiculous. We'll speak to the owner about this discrimination. I texted James, the general manager. My parents are in the lobby. Please seat them. Table 12. His response came immediately. Miss Chen, are you certain? Yes. This should be interesting. Table 12 was across the dining room from me. Close enough to see them. Far enough that they hopefully wouldn't notice me in the corner. They were seated with exaggerated ceremony, my mother's voice carrying her complaints about incompetent staff and declining standards. I watched my father scan the menu, watched his face pale slightly at the prices. Watched my mother order the most expensive items anyway, her way of punishing establishments she felt had slighted her. I turned my attention back to my meal. The amuse-bouche arrived. A delicate construction of hamachi with yuzu and microgreens. Perfect as always. Is that Amy? My mother's voice, slightly quieter now but still audible. I didn't look up. Where? Corner table. The window. That's definitely Amy. I felt my father's stare. Still didn't look up. What is she doing here? She can't possibly afford this place. Maybe she's meeting someone. A date. My mother laughed. Not kindly. Amy? On a date? At Meridian? Please. She probably wandered in by accident and doesn't know how to leave without embarrassing herself. I cut into the perfectly seared scallop that had just been placed before me. Should we go say hello? Richard, no. Let her have her dignity. Poor thing, probably saved for months just to sit there and pretend she belongs. I took a sip of the Château Margaux. $850 a bottle. I'd bought 6 cases of it last year for the restaurant cellar. They made it through their appetizers before my mother's curiosity overcame her. I saw her stand, saw her weaving through tables toward me, my father trailing behind. Amy. What a surprise. I looked up, arranged my face into a neutral expression. Mom. Dad. Hello. We didn't know you'd be here. Are you waiting for someone? No. Just having dinner. My mother's eyes scanned my table. The wine. The half-eaten appetizer that cost more than most people's grocery bills. The sommelier standing nearby ready to refill my glass. By yourself? At Meridian. Her laugh was nervous now. Amy, sweetheart, do you know how expensive this place is? I'm aware. We're just concerned. You know, on your salary, you're still doing that little computer thing, right? This might not be the most responsible. I'm fine, Mom. My father leaned in, his voice lower. Amy, if you need help with the bill, we can. I don't need help. There's no shame in it, my mother said, loud enough that nearby tables turned. We all make mistakes. Remember when you tried to buy that used car and the loan fell through? You've never been good with money, honey. It's not your fault. Some people just don't have the head for finances. I set down my fork carefully. I appreciate your concern. I'm fine. We'll just have the waiter split our check with yours, my father said, already gesturing. That way it won't be so obvious. That's not necessary. Amy, don't be proud. We're family. Let us help you. They returned to their table, satisfied they'd rescued me from my own incompetence. I watched them whisper to each other, watched my mother's sympathetic glances. I finished my scallops. The Dover sole arrived, prepared tableside with a brown butter sauce that was absolute perfection. I was just finishing it when I saw my mother stand again, this time marching toward the manager's station with purpose. Here we go. I couldn't hear the initial exchange, but I could see my mother's animated gestures, could see her pointing at me. The manager, David, who'd worked here for 4 years, maintained his professional composure. Then my mother's voice rose loud enough for half the restaurant to hear. I want to see the owner. Now. David's response was too quiet to hear. I don't care if he's busy. My daughter is being scammed. Look at her bill. This is predatory pricing. I pulled out my phone and texted James, office. Now please. His response, on my way. My mother was in full form now. She's 28 years old, makes maybe $40,000 a year doing basic data entry, and someone on your staff convinced her to order an $800 bottle of wine. This is elder abuse. Mom, I'm 28, not elderly, I called across the restaurant. She ignored me. Get me the owner. Now. David, bless him, tried again. Ma'am, the owner isn't on site this evening. Then the general manager. Someone with authority. Because I'm not paying for this scam and neither is my daughter. My father joined her at the manager's station. Let's be reasonable about this. Our daughter clearly doesn't understand what she's ordered. We'd like to speak to whoever can adjust this bill to something appropriate for someone of her means. I want the owner here now, my mother yelled at the manager, her voice echoing through the dining room. My daughter can't afford this bill. Dad added, his voice dripping with certainty. Obvious scam. Every table was watching now. The entire restaurant had gone quiet. I met David's eyes across the room, saw his silent apology. I said quietly, loud enough for nearby tables but not for dramatic effect. Understood. I pulled out my phone and texted, James, my parents are demanding to see you about my tab. The response was immediate. Jesus. On my way. I set my phone down and took another sip of wine. Watched my mother demand to see the itemized bill. Watched her face go red as she scanned the numbers. $400 for fish? It's Dover sole, Mom. From Cornwall. I don't care if it's from the moon. No one pays this much for fish. The executive chef, Marcus, who trained in Lion under Paul Bocuse, walked out of the kitchen, drawn by the commotion. He stopped short when he saw me, then saw my parents. Is everything all right, Miss Chen? Fine, Marcus. My parents are just concerned about pricing. Your Dover sole was prepared to your satisfaction? Perfect as always. My mother's head whipped toward me. As always. Amy, how many times have you been here? A few. A few? Do you have any idea how irresponsible? Then the door to the private office opened. James walked out. 6'2", impeccably dressed in a Tom Ford suit, the kind of authoritative presence that commanded rooms. He'd been general manager of Meridian for 3 years. Before that, he'd worked his way up through my restaurant group, starting as a server at our first location 10 years ago. Good evening, he said smoothly, approaching my parents. I'm James Morrison, general manager. I understand there's a concern about a bill. Yes, my mother said triumphantly. My daughter has been taken advantage of. Look at these prices. She can't afford this. We want this adjusted immediately, or we'll be reporting this establishment. James looked at the bill, then at me. I saw the corner of his mouth twitch. I see. And you are. Her parents. We're looking out for her because clearly no one at this restaurant is. I understand your concern, James said with perfect diplomatic calm. However, Miss Chen is a valued guest, and her bill is entirely appropriate for what she's ordered. Valued guest? She works in data entry. She makes maybe $40,000 a year. James's expression didn't change. Ma'am, I'm not at liberty to discuss another guest's finances. She's not another guest, she's our daughter, and we know what she can and cannot afford. Nevertheless, how long has she been coming here? My father demanded. I'm not at liberty. Answer the question. James looked at me. I gave him a small nod. Miss Chen has been dining with us for approximately 3 years. The silence that followed was spectacular. My mother's mouth opened, closed, opened again. 3 years. Yes, ma'am. That's impossible. Amy, where are you getting this money? I took another sip of wine. From work. From data entry? I don't do data entry, Mom. Then what do you do? I work in hospitality. My father's face was red now. Hospitality? Like waitressing? Not exactly. Amy, we demand to know what's going on. Are you in debt? Is someone giving you money? Because this, he gestured wildly at the restaurant, this is not sustainable on any salary you could possibly be making. James cleared his throat. Perhaps this conversation would be better continued in private? And oh, my mother snapped. We're not going anywhere until someone explains how our daughter is committing financial suicide in your establishment. Mom, I'm not committing financial suicide. Then explain this. She shoved the bill at me. $2,300 for one meal. For one person. It's my birthday. I don't care if it's the second coming, no one spends this much on dinner. I do. With what money? The entire restaurant was watching now. Even the kitchen staff had emerged, drawn by the commotion. James tried again. Sir, ma'am, I really think. We're not leaving until we get answers, my father said firmly. And frankly, I'm questioning how this establishment operates. Do you regularly allow young women to run up bills they clearly cannot afford? Mr. Chen, we're going to need to speak with the owner. The real owner. Not you. James met my eyes. I could see the question there. I'd kept my ownership quiet for years. My parents had no idea. No one in my family did. That was the way I'd wanted it. But sitting there listening to my mother rant about my incompetence, watching my father's certainty that I was some kind of fraud, I set down my wine glass. Mom, Dad, James doesn't own Meridian. Obviously, my mother snapped. Which is why we want to speak to whoever does. That would be me. The silence was absolute. My mother laughed. Actually laughed. Amy, this isn't funny. I'm not joking. You own this restaurant? Yes. This restaurant. Meridian. 3 Michelin stars, 6-month waiting list, Meridian. Yes. My father shook his head. That's impossible. Do you have any idea what a restaurant like this costs? About $12 million for the initial purchase and renovation. Another $3 million in working capital the first year. Amy, stop. The building was a steal actually. The previous owner was over-leveraged and needed to liquidate fast. I bought it in 2019. My mother's face had gone pale. You're saying you own this building? The building, the business, the brand. Yes. No. You're confused. Maybe you have some small investment or you worked here and you're misremembering. I pulled out my phone, opened my email and handed it to James. Can you pull up the ownership documents, please? He took the phone, tapped a few times, then turned the screen toward my parents. Chen Hospitality Group, LLC. Majority owner and CO, Amy Chen. My father stared at the screen. This is a joke. Some kind of prank. James, I said calmly. How many properties does CHG currently own? 17, Ms. Chen. 12 in this state, 5 out of state. And total annual revenue? Last year we cleared $42 million. My mother sat down heavily in the nearest chair. Amy, where did you get $12 million? I didn't start with $12 million. I started with 40,000. 40,000? From where? Remember Grandma Rose? Your grandmother? What does she? My mother's eyes widened. The money she left you when you were 18? Yes. That was for college. I know. I used it differently. You dropped out of college for this? I didn't drop out. I graduated. 2 years early actually with a degree in hospitality management and a minor in finance. Then I took Grandma's money, which she left specifically to me with no restrictions on its use, and I invested it. My father was shaking his head. $40,000 doesn't become 12 million. Not overnight, no. I started small. Bought into a struggling cafe near campus. Turned it around in 18 months, sold it for $300,000. Bought a lunch spot downtown, did the same thing. Each property I learned more, made better decisions, built a reputation. This is insane, my mother whispered. By the time I was 25, I had enough to make a real play. That's when Meridian came available. Everyone thought I was crazy, too young, too inexperienced, the market was wrong. But I knew I could make it work. And did you? James asked quietly, even though he knew the answer. We're averaging $8,000 per night in revenue. Booked solid for the next 7 months. We've been profitable since month 4. I watched my parents process this. Watched the calculations happening behind their eyes. But you live in that tiny apartment, my mother said weakly. I like that apartment. It's quiet. You drive a 10-year-old Honda. It runs perfectly fine. You wear clothes from Target. They're comfortable. All these years we thought you were barely getting by. I know. Why didn't you tell us? I looked at my mother. Really looked at her. When would I have told you, Mom? At Sunday dinner when you were explaining to Aunt Linda that I'd never amount to anything? Or maybe at Dad's retirement party when you introduced me as our daughter who does something with computers. Or perhaps at Christmas when you gave me a Costco gift card because you said I probably needed help with groceries. Amy. You never asked what I actually did. You just assumed. You decided who I was and no evidence to the contrary mattered. My father found his voice. You let us believe. I let you believe what you wanted to believe. I stopped correcting you after the first 100 times because it was exhausting. You weren't interested in who I actually was. You were interested in who you decided I should be. That's not fair, my mother said. We're your parents. We were concerned. You were embarrassed. There's a difference. The restaurant was still silent. James stood perfectly still, professional to the core. My mother's voice was small. So all those times we offered to help you with rent. I own the building. I'm the landlord. The car loan that fell through. I paid cash. I just didn't want to deal with your questions about where I got the money. The job you said was data entry. I said I worked with data. I do. Revenue data, market analysis, profit margins. I never said entry level. My father was doing the math now, I could see it. 17 properties. 42 million in revenue. Amy, what are you worth? That's not really relevant. Amy. I sighed. Personally, after liabilities and operating expenses, about 18 million, give or take. My mother made a sound like she'd been punched. $18 million. Yes. And you never told us. No. Why? I thought about how to answer that. Thought about all the years of Amy doesn't understand money. And Amy makes poor decisions, and Amy needs our help managing her life. Because I didn't want this, I said finally. This moment right here. Where suddenly I'm not the disappointment anymore. Where suddenly my choices make sense. Where suddenly you're interested in my life. That's not, Mom, that you have spent my entire adult life telling me directly and indirectly that I was failing. That I was irresponsible. That I didn't understand how the world worked. And I let you believe it because proving you wrong felt less important than building something real. We could have helped, my father said. If we'd known. Helped how? By telling me I was too young? Too inexperienced? By insisting I get a real job at someone else's company? By making me prove myself to you before I'd proven myself to the market? He didn't have an answer. I stood up, placed my napkin on the table. James, please comp my parents' meal and add it to my account. Of course, Ms. Chen. Amy, wait, my mother started. I'm going to finish my birthday dinner now. You're welcome to stay or go, whatever you prefer. But I'm done with this conversation. I started to walk back to my table, then stopped. Turn back. One more thing. You've been on the waiting list for 3 years. I'm the one who's been declining your reservations. My mother's face went white. You what? Every time you called. Every time you tried to name drop Dad's business. Every time you complained to the hostess about not getting in. I saw the requests. I declined them. But why? Because this place is mine. I built it. I earned it. And I wasn't ready to share it with people who spent years telling me I'd never build anything. I walked back to my table. Sat down. Marcus had already brought out the next course. A perfectly aged ribeye with bordelaise sauce. "Miss Chen," he said quietly. "Happy birthday." "Thank you, Marcus." I cut into the steak. Perfectly medium rare. I was aware of my parents still standing by the manager's station, aware of James quietly guiding them back to their table, aware of the other diners pretending not to watch while absolutely watching. I ate slowly, savoring each bite. The ribeye was perfect. The wine was perfect. The view was perfect. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother, "We need to talk about this." I didn't respond. Another text, "Amy, please. We're your parents." I turned off my phone. The creme brulee arrived for dessert. The sugar caramelized to a flawless golden shell. I cracked it with my spoon, the sound sharp and satisfying. By the time I finished, my parents were gone. Their table cleared, their bill comped as requested. James appeared at my elbow. "How was everything, Miss Chen?" "Perfect as always." "I'm sorry about the disruption." "Not your fault." "How did they take it when they left?" "Quietly." "Your mother asked 3 times if I was certain about the ownership documentation." "And?" "I showed her the business license, the liquor license, and the deed to the building. All with your name." I smiled. "How did she react?" "She cried." "Your father asked if you'd be willing to have lunch with them tomorrow." "What did you say?" "I said I'd pass along the message." I considered it. Thought about 18 years of being underestimated. Thought about every dismissive comment, every assumption, every time they'd decided who I was without bothering to ask. "Tell them I'll think about it." "Of course." I stood and James walked me to the door. The sommelier had already packaged the remaining wine, still 3 glasses left in the bottle, in a protective case. "Have a wonderful evening, Miss Chen. And happy birthday." "Thank you, James." "Oh, and James." "Yes. You can put my parents back on the regular waiting list. Not the priority one. Regular." He smiled. "Understood." I walked out into the cool evening air. My 10-year-old Honda was exactly where I'd left it, parked in the owner's spot behind the building. I drove home to my tiny apartment, carried up the wine, and poured myself one more glass. My phone had 17 missed calls. 12 from my mother. 5 from my father. I turned it off again. Tomorrow I'd deal with the fallout. Tomorrow I'd decide whether to have that lunch, whether to rebuild something with my parents, whether their sudden interest in my life was worth the years of their disinterest. But tonight was still my birthday. And I'd had a perfect meal at my restaurant, served by my staff, paid for with money I'd earned. That was enough. I agreed to lunch. Not at Meridian, that felt too pointed. We met at a cafe I didn't own, neutral ground. They apologized. Genuinely, I think, though it's hard to tell with parents whether they're sorry for what they did or sorry they got caught. "We never meant to make you feel like you weren't good enough," my mother said. "But you did. We know. And we're sorry." My father was quieter. "I called some people I know in the restaurant industry. They all speak very highly of you. One of them said you're one of the best operators he's ever seen." "That's kind of him. Why didn't you want us to know?" I thought about it. Because I needed to build something that was mine. Completely mine. Without your approval, without your help, without your doubt. I needed to know I could do it. And now. I know. We talked for 2 hours. They asked questions, actual questions about the business. About how I'd made decisions. About what I wanted to build next. At the end, my mother asked, Can we come to Meridian again? As your guests. You can make a reservation like everyone else. Amy. But I'll tell James to accept it. First available table. It wasn't forgiveness exactly. But it was a start. 3 months later they came for dinner. Table 12, same as before. They were nervous, polite to the staff, didn't complain once about prices. When Marcus brought out a complimentary amuse-bouche, my father asked what it was instead of assuming he knew. My mother took a photo of her meal but asked permission first. Small things. But things that suggested they were trying. I watched from the bar where I'd stationed myself to observe. James caught my eye, raised an eyebrow in question. I nodded. He brought them a complimentary dessert. Nothing over the top, just a gesture of hospitality. They left a generous tip. Baby steps. Maybe eventually we'd get there. To a place where they saw me as I actually was, not as they'd assumed I'd be. But even if we didn't, I had this. My restaurant. My reputation. My success.